All right, guys. Hey, we're back here. So this is part three. This is John Marshall again. We met a couple other times, kind of continue on what we were talking about the last couple of times. So if you haven't heard the other two, you should go back and listen to them. But regardless, all of these are meant to be a standalone thing anyway. So anyway, when I'm talking about part three, John, what are we going to talk about today? And what do you want to mention about? Like, you don't need to talk about who you are every single time, right? But let's go ahead and do some kind of introduction and talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Sure, that sounds good. So my name's Jonathan Marshall. I'm a lawyer. I have a couple different businesses. And what we've been talking about, also been working with you, Butch, at the gym, doing jujitsu, learning that, and some other things. And what we're going to be talking about today is kind of a continuation of what we've been talking about for the last two sessions. And it's just about, strategies or tips for trying to learn new things. And really at any age, right? I'm 38 years old and decided, I'd like to learn jujitsu, having never done it before my entire life. I want to learn boxing, having never done it before in my life, right? Doing some MMA too. And, and so what I want to talk about, I think, is just a continuation of what we've been talking about, which is, again, how do you learn? And we've kind of structured it in a couple different parts. Part one of our talk related to this concept of not wasting time. And that is, if you want to learn something, really today is the best time to start. You spend a lot of time hand wringing, like, when's the best time? In my opinion, if you want to learn something, you've got it on your to-do list, start now. The second,
do you think that, not to cut you off, but do you think that's important because if not, you're going to procrastinate and not do it?
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you met somebody at the gym who says, I wish I would have done this earlier. I wish I would have started earlier. I wish I would have.
I think that's important, right? And that's kind of why I did cut you off. Sorry about that. But I think that's important because the same thing, right? Like, I don't know how many times I told myself I was going to do something, and then a year goes by, but I don't feel like a year went by, and I keep saying it, and I keep saying it, it either never happens, or it's like I waste too much time thinking about the thing instead of just jumping in and doing it,
Sure. And, our currency is really time. I mean, it's not money, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, don't waste it. If you want to learn something, do it. The second concept was gratitude for people who are willing to teach you. And that's both in the form of, formal coaches and, people you train with, or, people you work with who are willing to show you something. And it's important to identify those people. And it's also important to say thank you, right? Because teachers are important. We are not born with knowledge. We have to learn knowledge, and it takes good teachers to teach us. And if we don't have teachers, then we can't achieve and we can't learn anything.
True. Well, and I think just kind of following up on that too, the gratitude part actually helps the teacher want to teach you more, right? It kind of keeps everybody in the same wavelength, same frequency, right? That kind of keeps everybody involved, I think, right? It's kind of what I think. Yeah, that gratitude, like, for example, if we're just talking about you and I, like, there's very important sometimes, I think, just even, we're not talking about learning situation, but just being a friend. Like, sometimes I like to tell my friends, like, hey man, I appreciate what you did here. I appreciate this. And that's super important too, because people like to hear that, right? It makes them feel good, and it makes them know that they're appreciated and on the right track as well, which means they're going to do more, which is the point, right? Like, we need each other to be motivated and kind of progress, right? I guess.
Yeah, I have a friend named Chris who started a business. It's called 747 Club. And the reason 747, it refers to the time that he decided to start this. And he was a very successful producer of Broadway productions and all sorts of things. And basically what his business is he hosts dinners. And during these dinners, he gets a big group of people together, pretty intimate settings, and they cook and they have a dinner and they express gratitude. And I've been to one of these dinners in person. I did down in Atlanta. I've done a couple of them virtually because of COVID stuff. But I mean, his entire business is about helping people say thank you to one another.
Yeah.
And Fortune 500 companies use it, lots of publicly traded companies use it to obtain rapid kind of integration of workforces. Families use it. It's been very successful. Again, the concept is giving people a medium, an opportunity to say thank you.
No, I mean, it kind of goes along with this. I'm part of a lot of Fortune 500 companies through what I do, but it's team building, right?
Yeah.
More or less, right? We'll get together and do something similar. I've done such goofy stuff that at the time where I was like, this is ridiculous. Like I played laser tag with a bunch of 40, 50-year-olds, like, but you know what happens at the end though? It's actually almost always well worth it. Like, cause you're all of a sudden now I know these people better. We had a challenge, an obstacle. We went after it, and we're congratulating people on, even if they did bad, like, oh, you did a good job during this, right? Essentially, it's kind of the same thing. We're thanking each other for their effort or their time, and then we leave this thing with a brand new appreciation for each other and express gratitude for each other, and is literally very similar concept, right? But maybe in a different format. And I think the intimate setting actually makes a lot more sense because how much talking do I get playing laser tag? Very little. Yeah. So I think it sounds kind of weird probably for average people. I'm an average person too, but I mean, right when you hear that, but knowing that's what people do in order to get people closer together and on the same page, it makes a lot of sense actually. Right?
Mm-hmm. And then the next concept we talked about was the consistency habits, right? I mean, or the notion of being consistent and having good habits. And that's kind of the central part of learning, right? You've got to be, if you want to be a learner, you've got to be consistent about your learning, right? And you've got to develop good habits around learning. And so we spend a lot of time talking about strategies and approaches for being consistent and developing those good habits that are going to help you learn.
Well, yeah, for example, at our gym, just me and you, we go pretty much every day at 4:30, 4:45, the same amount of time. Consistency, everybody's used to going up at that time. We know it's going to be part of our daily habit. And here we are, like a year later, same time, same place, right? So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So those are the last podcasts we did, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so what's new on today?
So today we're going to do a couple of additional parts. Actually, we might finish today. And the idea is to talk about two related concepts and then kind of a final concept. And so those two related concepts are being willing to lose and how losing sets you up for future success. And then kind of a related topic is seeing and seizing opportunities out of what others might perceive as threats. Mm-hmm. And then the final topic that we should get to is just embracing the ethos of being a lifelong learning, right? Which is, this concept of, again, we have a finite period of time on this earth and, using our time well and realizing that really at any age, you can learn something. I mean, we've talked about Robert at the gym, Robert's, we think in his late 70s, possibly in his 80s. It's hard to say, but gets out there and wants to learn.
Out there and kicking some butt, huh?
Yeah. And so that's kind of the agenda for today. Is that okay?
And if I was going to follow up on Robert, for example, in those concepts, you have to admit, and I don't want to speak for Robert. Robert hears this. I don't want him to punch me in the face, but in some degree, he has to be willing to lose because he's late 70s, he's 80s, and he's going to the gym with people in their prime, or 18 years old, full of whatever. He's got to be willing to lose it, I would think, right? Like, I mean, at this point in life, I mean, I don't know what he thinks. I think he goes to have a good time and enjoys learning and a lot of everything that we're saying. But I think if I was going to look at that, what I look at as willing to lose means if I start something new, I need to expect that I'm not going to be good at it. Is that kind of what you're looking at when you say that?
So we think of savants, like masters. You think of Beethoven or Mozart or chess savants and people who are brilliant at things. And what's lost in the mix is that in reality, there are no quote unquote savants. You might have somebody who's better inclined to certain things, but Mozart wasn't born as a baby with a piano. He had to play, and he did play, and he played every day, and he played and he played and he played, right?
Yeah.
And studies have shown it takes about 10 years to master something, no matter how good you are. Maybe if you're really, really good, maybe it takes you 8, but it takes a period of time, right? And so during that period of time, you're going to have highs and lows, ups and downs. Things aren't going to go your way every single time, right? And it just takes time. And so what I'm talking about is being willing to lose is yes, being willing to spend the time to learn, but also recognizing that along the way, you may have failures. Things will not work out the way that you expected them to. And your progress sometimes may feel like you're going backwards, but that's part of life.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've found particularly helpful about trying to learn new things at any age, at least my age anyway, is that it helps you cope with life in general, right? Because in life in general, things don't always go my way, right? Yeah. I'm a lawyer. I've lost really big cases. Now, I could have taken those losses and said, you know what? I'm done. This is not for me. Or what I did with them was I learned, I said, gee, I shouldn't do that anymore. Or maybe I made that mistake or whatever the case may be. I'm going to learn from that. And so now, I'm better.
Well, how do you stay on that track though? Like, I think that's the hardest part for everybody, right? Is that you have the highs and lows, but the lows for most people outweigh the highs, right? And that's where they get off track, or that's when they quit. Let's just talk about like a diet, for example. Very simple, but you could have, let's say, 6 days you're perfect on your diet. Day 7, you ate some cake, whatever, got you bad, and then you're like, screw it, I'm gonna eat some more. And you just all of a sudden you're down on yourself. You're like, I screwed up. So you just literally forget the other 6 days that you did great, and then all of a sudden you're on the bad path again, right? And I think a lot of people do that, and I know that I do that too. I know that I have to constantly fight that urge to get down, because the same thing, right? I could have a day that 100% everything went my way, and then one little thing derailed me, and I'm dwelling this little thing. And I don't look at that as, sometimes, quite honestly, as an opportunity to learn. I look at it, I just get down, right? So I wonder if there's any tricks that kind of keep people on that path.
I think part of it is it's a mindset, right? In the notion of sometimes you have to train yourself to be able to train and learn, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Let me kind of break that down. That's not lawyer speak. Maybe it sounds like a little bit like lawyer speak, but the more things that you learn or are working on learning, it actually helps you in other domains, because you realize that it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a diet, learning jiu-jitsu, learning piano, learning Spanish, whatever the things you have that you're working on in your life, you see the same kind of trends and you're like, oh, well, that didn't go so hot today.
Yeah.
But that's part of learning stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's just part of it. And then what you'll find is it translates well into other parts of your life. Like I said, whether it be your marriage or your work, right? And it's just like when we're at the gym, we drill things, you train them, you drill them over and over and over again, because sometimes, the first time you do it doesn't go very well.
Yeah.
Maybe second time a little bit better, third time a little bit better, fourth time maybe you miss it completely, right? But over time you get better. And it's through that process, trial and error, that you get better and better and better. Now, it's not some sort of perfect trajectory, but I mean, that's what happens. And if you're not willing to lose, if you're not willing to have that bad day or that bad week or the bad month, the bad 6 months, then you can't learn anything.
Yeah. No, well, do you find yourself repeating that to yourself? Like, hey, here's an opportunity to get better. And that helps you stay out of that bad frame of mind? Or,
Yeah, because I think it helps ground me in
Mhm.
life in general.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people go through life and they say, look, everything's bad. All this bad stuff's happening. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's life. Right? I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah.
again, maybe somebody has a charmed life. I'd like to meet them and talk to them and figure out how they're doing it.
Yeah.
But I can't say I do. I've done some good things and I've had some things not work out, and that's part of life. But I think part of it is, though, being willing to put yourself out there and being willing to lose, and then saying, when you do lose, well, I'm not going to quit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it that way again, or maybe I'll try it this way, right? And that's I mean, in part, kind of the zest of life too, right?
No, and I think for me, I know that I get there in life. I do get there eventually, right? It's just different than training. Like if you and I were training and we're doing jujitsu or whatever it is, but let's say that you submit me or something, it's black and white. I have an easier time in that. Really, just knowing this, I just need to get better, and I feel good about it. And I think the reason is because you just get right back on the horse and you go, right? Like if you armbarred me, it's a good job, and we clap hands and bump fists and we go right back at it, right? The difference is sometimes in maybe your professional life, something doesn't go right and you don't get the opportunity to jump back right in it, right? Like it's not like, all
The,
right, it's your do-over, right? It doesn't really happen that way.
the consequences are certainly more severe. There are
Yeah.
financial consequences, bankruptcy, all sorts of potential threats out there. You could lose your business. I mean, just lose your marriage, all sorts of horrible things that are out there. But
Yeah.
again, the concept is, especially as a business owner, is you've got to take risks. You've got to be willing to lose. If you aren't, it's very hard to succeed.
Yeah.
And being on the mat, for instance, is a bit of a microcosm. Sometimes it is a different level of risk, but I'm saying, and oftentimes, well, for instance, in the practice of law, for instance, you're going to have a bad day. You're going to have a bad part of your case. You got to overcome it, though. And no case is perfect, right?
Yeah.
And so you take your lumps and then you get back up. You try again, right? You try again. You try again. And you keep on pushing. Or if you want to lose badly, you just quit. Stop.
Yeah. That's not going to go well for you, right?
No, that's going to go real bad.
But I think really following up what you said earlier, like when you say you have to be willing to take risks, I do think there's a difference, meaning that I'm assuming what you're meaning is a calculated risk. Like when I know when I take a risk, for example, I've done some business ventures. I've done some things that were very risky, right? I could have lost, just like you said, I could have lost everything. I could have lost financially, could have been broke, bankrupt, everything. However, I had looked at every angle of it, much probably like a law thing. I would assume like when you go into a case, you're looking at somebody saying, here's one angle they could take. So here's my answer to that angle. But if they said this, here's my answer to the blah blah blah. You kind of got every angle. If you're a good lawyer, right? You're preparing for everything they could possibly say. That's kind of how I look at the risks. I look at everything, and hopefully I haven't missed anything. So then I take a calculated risk, which is still a risk, but I know here's the downfall. I can afford to, if everything went bad, I can afford this risk because of the upside or whatever, right? And I've taken a couple of those almost every time. I think because I was so prepared, they worked out. There's a couple of times where maybe my wife would argue maybe a couple of things didn't work out, but I would argue the other way because I would still argue because I'm like, look, I took the calculated risk. It didn't work out perfectly. However, I knew that and I took the risk and I think it was worth it, right? There's a couple I can think off the top of my head that I shouldn't have, there's a couple of decisions I shouldn't have made looking back, and I made the hasty decision but it still kind of worked out, right? Like maybe financially it didn't work out, but there's some aspect of it worked out, right? But
Right.
anyway, the reason I say that is because I'm afraid sometimes people like they don't think everything through and they take these risks and they end it's like willy-nilly. It's an old person term, but right, they kind of get to a certain spot and it's not where they should be. I think risk is good if it's you should still calculate it out, right? It's okay to lose. Like that's the thing. And I guess I don't want to I want to make sure that I like I say that I've lost a couple things where I took a calculated risk, but I'm happy that I took the risk because the upside was still okay, right? Like I lost on this side, but the other side was still good, right? If that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, I think some people should look at that too, because I don't think really like what you do in a daily job, maybe not. I don't think everybody understands that. Like that when you take a case, for example, that's kind of what you're doing. Like you're looking at. I'm assuming, right? I'm also not a lawyer, but I'm assuming you're looking at the argument the other person's going to make. You're looking at the counter argument, and you're looking at every angle that they could come at you, and then you go right. And then whatever happens happens. Hopefully your arguments are stronger, your strategy is stronger, but however there's always both people are kind of calculating things out, right? There's going to be a winner and loser, and you've got a path to get there. And hopefully you pick the right path, and sometimes you pick the risky path, and hopefully you've got still got a couple little things, tricks in your bag, right? Does that make sense? I know I'm kind of rambling, but I just want to make sure that like when somebody says take a risk, like don't hang on the edge of a cliff with no
Sure.
plan. Like,
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? Like you have to have a plan, right? Does that make sense? Kind of.
Sure. And, we are kind of mixing somewhat apples and oranges between learning new things and, and taking business risks, right? I do think that there's a lot of learning that needs to be done about risk and like what is risk and how do you manage risk, especially in business, which is probably a topic for another day.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that through this process of working and learning difficult things in particular, it makes you better able to cope with the types of risks and the type of decisions that you have to make in your business life. It makes me better,
Yeah.
frankly. And you're right. When I, for instance, decide to take a big case, I may be committing millions of dollars to the case, years of my life, years of other people's lives, right? And it's a huge undertaking, and it's not a risk that I take lightly.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that notwithstanding all the preparation and all the work you do to lay the groundwork, you can do everything right. And just sometimes things just don't work out. For instance,
Yeah.
you might have the perfect case and you work it up perfectly and everything goes right. But then maybe there's a bankruptcy, completely unforeseen, or a pandemic, right? And your investment is gone. And that happens. But I'm saying you've got to be willing to take those, and I think you're right to qualify it, right? Those educated, smart risks.
Well, yeah, and I guess really when you said maybe apples and oranges, you're completely right, right? Like because the other thing is I'm thinking of your job, high dollar situations, but if we're just talking about whether you should start jujitsu or not, it's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, what is the downside? That's not a risk where I need to qualify what I'm doing because the downside's not that great. Or should I fly a plane? Should I, right? Should I do all these things? Should I, climb Mount Everest? Whatever it is in my mind, there's a risk involved, which means, and there is a big risk that if I climb Mount Everest, I could die. However, right, there's still, it's a little different, right? Like, I guess that's the other point. We're also not talking about, this is not a podcast necessarily on how to do your financial everyday planning. This is more of a podcast on how to live life where you're taking risks, meaning that are you going to go out and have fun today? Or are you going to just be normal? Meaning like, are you going to go to work and go home and hang out with your wife? And all those things are great. Or are you going to go out and have fun, right? Like you're going to learn a new skill.
Mhm.
and go out of your comfort zone, I guess is the point, right? And then come back. That's more what we're talking about, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So
And again, the concept here is, being willing to lose.
Mhm.
And, when you learn new things, you've got to be willing to lose. And again, when you're willing to lose and willing to learn from those losses, again, it helps you with other things. I think it helps you with your work, your family life, just a whole host of things, because it's just something has to be drilled and learned too, right? And if you don't practice it, when bad stuff starts to happen, again, it's back to what I originally said. It's like, this is terrible. But
I think
um,
to one of your other points, so in just this one we're talking about, so you're going to see an opportunity in what happened, right?
yeah,
So expound upon that. When you say you're looking for an opportunity, do you mean you're looking for opportunity? If you lose, how are you going to get better? Are you looking, what do you mean by looking for another
yeah. So this is kind of a related concept. So we've got, I think you've got to be willing to lose. You have to be willing to lose, and how, you need to understand how losing sets you up for future success.
Yeah.
And you've also got to see, and I think this is probably more merging into a bit of the business concept, but I think it also has a lot of relevancy just to learning things. It's just to see, the opportunities that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, with every opportunity, it's a potential threat. If you go, the business schools and things like that, they usually say an opportunity is a threat is an opportunity. It just depends on the way you look at it. And so, for instance, if I'm thinking about, doing jujitsu, it's possible that there's a threat there in a sense that I could get hurt. I could
Yeah.
hurt something, right? But there's also great opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's opportunities to physical fitness, opportunities to learn something, right? To train things that are difficult, to have achievement, something that makes me feel good, right? Every day that I do it, I always feel better coming out of it. But, it's a threat too, right? In a sense, or a potential threat. And so what I'm kind of trying to impart here is that, with things that sometimes seem to be threats in life, there's actually, maybe an opportunity or two out of it.
Yeah. I wish too, like, because we have really, because both of us do jujitsu, right? There's a lot of correlation and a lot of stuff. It sucks because I wish that everybody that listens to this did jujitsu. I'm assuming not everybody does, but when you make that statement, it for a guy that does jujitsu or boxing or MMA, I think of that because when you say there's a potential threat and there's also potential opportunity, right? Especially in boxing. Let's look at this, right? Every time I throw a punch, there's an opportunity for you to counter
Absolutely.
and hit me back, right? But it's part of boxing, right? It's
Hey,
like, and that's how you teach somebody, like, because they'll say, well, if I do this, they might hit me.
I was working that today,
Yeah.
on the sparring. I was literally that concept. I'm like, all right, I'm going to counter. I'm not going to throw original. I'm not going to throw. I'm just going to wait for the person to throw, and I'm just literally going to counter it.
Yeah.
As soon as they begin to throw, I'm going to throw.
Well, it's funny, and it's a good thing. And obviously, I didn't spar that today because I'm assuming my arm's not ready to. But
Right.
if I had, that literally was going to be it because I was like, I don't want to throw a lot of punches. So what I'm going to do is do what you said. I'm going to counter,
Right.
and then hopefully that works out. But that's the kind of the point. Like it's the same thing though. Like if the other person, so the other as the other person, let's say that every time they threw a jab, you slipped it and threw, let's say like a right hand or you overhand right, you come over top, whatever it is. They have an opportunity. Like, so would they not throw the jab? Right. I mean, so that's the thing. So you should throw there's still, everything has a consequence, right?
Right.
So it comes with what you're saying. There's an opportunity to learn, and there's also an opportunity to realize every time I throw this jab, the guy punches me in the face. So I have
Yeah.
to make a decision at this point. Do I still want to throw that jab, or do I want to throw my jab a little differently? Do I want to fake my jab and or blah blah? You know what I mean? Like tons of stuff. So that's what I'm saying. Like it's really, I wish everybody did that kind of stuff because it's so easy to correlate stuff. Because the next time that, let's say that even during that sparring session, I'm just kind of not putting it all together, but I leave, and this is what normal people do that do what we do. if you're getting better is I dissect what happened. So I'm like, okay, every time I did this, John did this. So the next time I get better, I take that information, I get better. So it's an opportunity to get better, like you said, through losing. And I would consider losing being every time I threw a punch, I got countered. So I'm like, okay, next time I'm not going to not throw that, because if I don't throw that, I'm never going to win because I'm never doing anything. So I have to keep getting better. Um, it's just interesting. I guess what I'm saying is I totally get that. I can correlate everything from what I do to that physical aspect. I wish more people could,
Well,
you
you
know,
can correlate it at multiple levels, right? We can correlate it to what we do in jujitsu. I mean, in the sense that if you do something, right? If you move in a particular direction, you may be opening yourself up for something, right?
yeah,
And then, and as you've always said, there's always a counter to the counter to the counter.
yeah. It's just whoever runs out of the information, right? But today was a good example. Like if we go over what you and I did today, we went over lasso guard for people that know jujitsu, which is an open guard technique. But you're baiting me to pass your guard. As soon as I pass your guard, you put me in a bicep slicer crusher, right?
Right.
But like I would look, it's the same thing. I look at the path because I'm like, that path looks good. He's opened up everything. He's letting me go this way. This guy messed up. I'm going to pass his guard. So I pass his guard. And all of a sudden now I'm in a bicep slicer, right? So the next time though, I remember, okay, just because he lets me do that doesn't mean I should do that, because last time he about broke my arm. So like I can't do that. So then I take the information, it's an opportunity I lost. So it's an opportunity to get better, right? Because I learned that position. Like anyway, it just, all this stuff makes a lot of sense to me, and I wish and I hope. The good thing is the audience that listens to my stuff and your stuff is mostly combat related, so we're good there, right? I worry about like somebody like my wife that doesn't do this stuff. Like, how does she correlate? I mean, how does an average person look at that? And that's, I guess, what brought this up is that because I know in my real life, jujitsu is perfect. It's easy to do. Boxing is easy to do. And then in my real life, something goes wrong and I don't go, okay, I don't need to do that right away. Ultimately I do, because I'm a successful person, I think, kind of, and I'm always kind of learning. So ultimately I do get to the answer. I just wish I got to it as quickly as I do jujitsu. And the difference is kind of what I said earlier, is that unfortunately, you just don't jump back on the horse when you make a decision on, let's say, law. They'll go your way, and then you're out. Right? You can't go. Let's do a do-over right now, because that's what we do in jiu-jitsu or boxing. Let's do it again, man. You punched me. Let's try again. Let's go.
Yeah, but also too, again, with those threats, like let's equate it. Let's a different domain. Let's talk about business for a second. I'll talk about law. Yeah, I used to do a lot of work with a lawyer who who recently passed away, but he had a very successful 30-year career as a lawyer. And speaking with his widow, she said he had to reinvent his career 4 times. 4 times he had to stop what he was doing, not because of anything he did wrong, but there were changes in the law. The type of cases weren't available. 4 times stop. To put it in perspective, I mean, really learn something new, right? And each time, he was able to be successful. And I think, frankly, he would probably admit, if he were here, that each time he got more successful. It was just by retooling. And these were threats. My practice is ending. I'm not going to be able to do what I do anymore. That's a potential threat, but it actually turned into an opportunity.
Well, and I think even on that same thing, I was writing a little note for myself, but I've been impressed, and some of these people have just learned from what other people did. But if you ever just look at what people do, what they did in the current situation with the pandemic and COVID, it's amazing how fast people have adapted, right? Like, meaning that if you're a restaurant, also now you have pickup service, or you have an outdoor dining, or it's kind of, and some people didn't have, like, let's say, obviously in here at Charleston, like Bridge Road Bistro, right? They didn't really have an opportunity for outdoor dining, but then they took some of their parking spots and made it, it took them a while. But like, to me, I look at all those little things and I'm like, I'm amazed at the innovation that people made. They didn't just say, I can't do that. They just, it was fast, right? Like, some, that's what I said, like some I give I don't know who started it, but I give the ultimate credit to whoever, like some, like they never missed a beat, right? It was so easy for you to just give up, you know?
Look at Soho's, right? They
Yeah.
created their outdoor space, and it arose out of this terrible threat, this terrible thing. And I would never label COVID as an opportunity, but what people are doing is, bad position,
Yeah.
and you got to pick your poison, right? You can say, I'm done, I quit,
Yeah.
or you can do the best you can. And so some people unfortunately have had to quit, right?
Yeah.
And others are doing the best that they can. And and I think, and you can see it. I mean, for instance, there's this little company. It's called Zoom.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
And we're using the service right now. I mean, their stock price is about, the last time I checked, is about $500 a share.
When you say shit like that, it gets on my nerves, because I'm like, man, why do I miss these opportunities?
Well, I'm just saying, right?
Amazon, I get on that, like,
And
they're crushing it.
well, I mean, like for instance, part of this, my career has often required me to travel a lot, right? Travel constantly, and now I don't.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's definitely some drawbacks to that, not being able to get out like I was and do the meetings that I was doing, but also, it's been good in the sense that people are obviously more comfortable communicating through this mode. And, it's meant that I got to spend a lot more time with my family, which is always good, right? I enjoy my family. And it means I've had time to train, right? That I didn't otherwise have, or might not otherwise have had.
No, that's a good point. I think if we look at that, if we're just looking at these, because I always think it's super important to kind of like give an example of what we're talking about, right? And this is a good example. If not, and it's sad to call COVID an opportunity, just like you said. I feel you shouldn't really say that, right? But at the same time, if it wasn't for that, quite frankly, you and I wouldn't be here right now. I had to do Zoom for work, and I absolutely hated it. I was like, why would I ever? It's like FaceTiming. Like when another guy FaceTimes me, I want to punch him in the face. Like, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't want to look at your face when I talk to you. It seems weird, right? However, now we're doing it, and I've taken this as an opportunity to learn how to communicate with people better, right? This is kind of the point of this, and actually have meaningful conversations that I may or may not had before, but I didn't really take value in them and an opportunity to get better. I talked to people because that's how humans, interact, right? I literally put no effort or thought into it. Now I'm like, well, yeah, like if I get on this Zoom meeting with John and, it's stupid because nobody wants to listen to it, so I'm critiquing myself, right? And like it ultimately, it's not the whole thing, is like I really feel like I've learned to communicate with people better. That's going to make me better in my job and at home and everything. And the same thing, like, and my wife made a good point the other, because she listened to a couple of these, and she was kind of being funny, but she was also being slightly serious. Like she just said, why do you not talk to me like that? Right? Like, so she was kind of aggravated, and I was like, no, like I totally get what you're saying, because there's a difference. Like when I talk to somebody on here, it's dedicated. There's nobody around. We're on this computer. We're dedicated. I'm actually listening because that's what I'm supposed to. I'm not preoccupied with something else.
Phone,
Yeah, I'm on it, and it's sad, but I actually, and I need to follow through with her, but I said we probably should do a podcast together so that I talk to you like that. But it's true, and I'm using this opportunity to learn more. For example, we're not just sitting here talking, right? We're doing things that can make you and I better, and hopefully help our friends, right? Like there's nothing weird going on here, but we're thinking like, here's a good medium for us to talk to each other. We could have the same conversation over a beer at somewhere else, but now, like, our thought was, let's record it, let people listen to it, critique it, see where we could get better, see if they agree with us. And because somebody might say, hey, like, I like what you said, but I think this, and if it's valid, then we're like, oh yeah, actually I never thought of that, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of the point. So like the same thing, I've taken this and created this, and you've done your thing too. We've made something. It's an opportunity. I'm not
Absolutely.
calling it a good thing with COVID by any means, but
No.
um, yeah, I'm looking for an opportunity to, like, I lost something, which was, everything we had before, the gym and my life, right? But now I have an opportunity to create. I've had some of the best conversations with people, quite frankly, that I would never have talked to in that same degree. Like, and you remember early on when we kind of had like happy hour on Zoom. You remember
Yeah.
that? They would I mean, one of them lasted 5 hours. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, it was kind of,
I think I might have fallen asleep during a certain part of it, but
yeah, it was kind of ridiculous, but ridiculous. If I just look at it, it's ridiculous. But it was great in
it
the
was
fact
great. It was great because people were looking for something. They were looking for a
that
connection. I know I was sitting in my house, and like everybody else was, they were sitting in their houses, and it was just, people were looking for some way of communicating
yeah,
and gaining some degree of human interaction.
yeah.
That simple. And you help provide that medium, and I think it was really important to a lot of people, frankly.
For sure. And that's ultimately why it evolved to this, because I was like, hey, a lot of the conversations we were having, like, we'd have 15 people on there, right? And then,
Mhm.
people would get drunk and whatever else, and it would evolve into something.
I
And that's,
never did that.
yeah, it's like, maybe we should do this in a different way. And that's what we're doing now, right? Like, and something good's come out of it. So they kind of go, like I said, if I'm looking down our little timeline, it goes with everything. It's like seeing opportunity. This kind of what, this happened, and then really, like, even like your last point, the kind of embracing lifelong learning, right? Is that if I'm looking at myself, as every opportunity that we've had, like, this is an opportunity that, okay, let's get better at communicating with, like, every time I'm on this thing, I'm trying to get better at just communicating and listening to a person without cutting them off, right? And then actually understanding a person, doing everything, right? Whether it's, and this is a small aspect of it, but like I said, I think it's important to give like a personal example of something that maybe that I did or that you did, so that people understand, like, yeah, this is one thing that I've done, but I'm constantly doing something, right? Like, and we talked about it earlier, like CrossFit, like, it's part of, like, if you do CrossFit, for example, you're going to always learn, because there's so many different lifts to do. There's, somebody's always better than you. You're
Something
always
get
bad
better.
at
Your
everything.
technique can always get better. It's
Yeah,
endless, right?
exactly. And I think it's important that we pick things that are like that, because if I'm the best at something, if you're the best at something, I think what happens to people, because I run into these people, right? They're arrogant, right? And especially if you're in their wheelhouse. And then I think, and I've had these conversations with people before, but because ultimately they got on my nerves so bad, where they're so arrogant. And I was like, look, you're good at this, but come to my gym, I'll beat you up. Like, you will not be good at
Right.
anything anymore. And like, I don't, it's probably not the best way to say it, but eventually I've just had enough. And, and then,
Right.
and it's a good point, because it's the same thing. Like, I'm doing their thing. Like, for example, like if I was running with you, right? I can't, you could probably run a 5-minute mile. And 4 minutes later, I'd pop in the door, right? And I've done that with people, and people are like making fun of me, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. You walk in the gym, I'll kill you in 2 minutes. Not even 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Right? It's a different thing. But so my point is, like, I don't walk in a room and say, like, I can kill this guy in 30 seconds,
Right.
because that's not exactly true either. But right, but they walk in, I'm like, I can run better than this guy. Well, who cares, man? Like, I make more money than this guy. Like, if we judge on everybody on one thing that we're good at, then that's not how life is, right? Like, you should do something that you're terrible at,
Mhm.
so that you respect everybody else, right? I'm not good at plumbing, right? Somebody else is. Like, I'm not good at,
Either.
a million things, or at least that, but that helped me learn, like, because I don't know why, but I just realized, like, that I'm such not a man when it comes to my house. Like, everything I think's manly, like fighting, walk in my house or go hunting, like, I can't do any of those things. Like, and so I always make those jokes, I'm like the most non-manliest man, and those guys are like, what are you talking about, you fight? I'm like, well, I used to, but even if that's good, I don't, I can't do any things that you do, so I have to give you credit for that, and that keeps me humble. And it also, like, gives recognition for, and it means, it also tells me that like I'm nothing, right? And the one good thing that I am good at, like there's a million people better than me at that thing, and I need to learn all these other things, right? Like I don't know, but I think that's where everybody kind of needs to be, right? Is kind of our thing, I guess. I hope so.
Well, I think it's a nice segue into the last point. And really, what is the last point? The last point is, being a lifelong learner. What is being a lifelong learner? It's an attitude. It's a mood. It's just what you said. It's a mood, for instance, of humility. You can't be a lifelong learner if you can't be humble, right? Because learning new things is difficult. It's hard. It presents threats. It presents, potential risks. It presents, putting you in a position where you may lose, right? You may not be so successful. And if you don't approach it with the right attitude, then the attitude of, look, I'm here to learn. I'm going to be constantly learning things for as long as I possibly can on this earth, then you can't learn. You can have the best habits and be consistent, but it's a mood, right? It's a frame of reference.
Well, it goes back to one of your earlier podcasts that we had where you express gratitude to the people that help you, right? Because it also kind of takes, if you use it correctly, it takes some of the pressure off you, right? Like if you walked in, for example, this happens at the gym sometimes. People, they don't know jujitsu, right? And they get tapped out and they smack the mat and they yell, oh, whatever, right? And it's weird because I'm like, you literally walked off the street. Did you think you're gonna win? Like, if you thought you'd win, why you give me money? Like, I don't understand what you're thinking, right? So the correct attitude would have been like, man, that was awesome, man. Good job. Like that's like, help me, thank you. That was awesome. Like that's the thing. Like give those guys gratitude and respect, and it also takes some pressure off you in a roundabout way, even if that's not what you want to do. But if you're one of those guys that you hate losing so bad that you're gonna smack the mat and yell cuss words and all this stuff, then look at it a different way where you can say like, hey man, like I appreciate what you're gonna make me better, and figure out a way that you're, because that's hurting those people's pride. That's why they're acting out that way. I get it, right?
Well, again, in my opinion, to learn things, you have to be humble. You've got to be willing to learn, and it's not a mood of pride. And it's not to say that you're not competitive. I mean, I'm a very competitive person. I like to win things. I have to win things. It's my business to win things. If I didn't win anything, then I couldn't put food on the table. And it's very serious to me to win. But I also know that winning is a process, and it's an attitude in and of itself. And it's an attitude of, again, being willing to take good, educated risks, right?
Yeah.
In very uncertain environments, proceeding and making decisions, hard decisions that aren't clear, and living with those decisions, and taking your lumps, getting back up again, learning from mistakes you make, and going forward. And it's an attitude, right? It's an attitude, and it's a mood. And it's absolutely critical to learning.
But you need, that's the other thing, you need help. I think sometimes when you're being so competitive, which is okay, I think it's okay. I guess this is what I kind of do too to combat that, because I'm competitive in a lot of things, and more, it's calmed down the older I got, but it's okay. Like what I do is I internalize that. Maybe inside my head, I'm smacking the mat and yelling words, right? Inside my head.
Well,
in reality, I have to, if I don't humble myself and ask you the correct things to get better, I'm not going to get better. So the point is, if I was like, all right, John, let's go again. I'm going to kill you this time, right? And then you went as hard as you could and you beat me again. And I was like, all right, let's go again. And you beat me again. But nowhere in the middle of that did I ask you what you did. I'm not going to get better, right? So that's where you need to take the learning thing. I'm saying, okay, man, like, what is going on? Why are you kicking my ass? Like,
right.
And then,
why am I not, why can't I pass your guard? Why?
Yeah.
Why are people getting swept? It's the same And you know that I do that all the time. I'm like, wait, stop. Like, what, so you did this and I did that, and then you countered with this. And then, I got submitted or whatever, right? Like, what could I have done there? Right? Where did I make the mistake? And part of that is like, yeah, and I get mad at myself sometimes. Like, I knew better than that. I shouldn't have done it that way, but it's part of learning. And
it's okay to get mad at yourself if you knew the answer and you still keep making the same mistake, right? That's a different thing. Like, because you're frustrated at yourself. Like,
yeah,
at that point, I'm like, why did I do that? Right? Like, that's different.
And that's part of it, right? You're going to have good days and bad days, and things are going to go so well, and then they're going to go so badly. Yeah. And it's okay, right? It's okay. If you want to go into learning new things, you want to go into life again with this idea. And I challenge anybody, let me meet that person, right? Where everything just goes so well every single time, then great. But I mean, the reality is, you're going to have your ups and downs. And that's really, again, one of the great values of just learning things all the time is it puts you in the right frame of mind to deal with those things, because things aren't going to go right every single time.
Yeah. No, and here's what I'm thinking, to not necessarily close everything, but what I'm trying to think is examples where, let's think of some examples where he puts this into practice. Obviously, I know that one of the things that you did was just recently started at our gym, right, within the last year, which is a thing that you're like, I'm constantly learning, right? You came and did some jiu-jitsu, which led to boxing and kickboxing and MMA and literally everything. I mean, it went from one small aspect of MMA to the whole gambit, right? Within this last year, it kept expanding. And then maybe like so in my example, right, that's what I do. I have a gym, I have a job, but it was a little bit before the pandemic, but I was like, like, I would like to learn how to fly a plane. Why not? Right. So I went and did that. Right. I'm afraid of heights. Right. There's a lot wrong with that whole decision. So, I mean, I also don't fit in little planes because I'm too big.
No, you don't.
There's a whole lot wrong with that decision, but I was committed, and I, like, ultimately I realized I just don't like it. Honestly, but I stuck with it for a little bit. I'm probably not going to go all the way to get my license, because I'm actually torn about that a little bit. I don't want to start something and not finish it, so I may do that. Well, it was kind of one of the decisions I made. I wanted to pick something that I knew, knowing that I'm afraid of heights. I'm probably not going to like it. Let's just jump in there and see, right? And it was kind of my opportunity to take some lumps, learn some things, and then go. So that way, I can always say, like, I did it. It's just not my thing, and it has nothing to do with being able to do it. It's just, I literally do not enjoy it. Like, there's just nothing. Every friend that I have that flies planes are like, you would love it. It's unbelievable. Blah, blah, blah. I've heard the weirdest things. And then I got in there. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking. I don't even know where I'm going. I have no clue what's going on. Like, I'm like, how do you get over here? And the guy's like, you just follow the highway. I'm like, I don't know what highway that is. That's not how I even drive. I go places. So if I can't find like a landmark, if I can't follow that sign, like, I'm pretty much screwed. I'm in the air. What do I look at, and I was like, this is just totally not for me, But the point is, I've tried to pick some stuff that would make me a lifelong learner. What would, I mean, whether it's an example that you have, and like I said, I already kind of burst your bubble.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously those are some things I picked up. I mean, I've, now, 10 years, almost 10 years into CrossFit. I picked that up in my 30s. Actually, no, I think probably late 20s.
We started about the same time. We think so, right? Similar.
So, so we may have more years before 10 years in, but I was doing I started running, went from 5Ks, 10Ks, 15Ks to marathons, and then ultra marathons. And doing this, learning Spanish. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
I take Spanish lesson every day, right? For an hour, every single day, except for Sunday. Yeah. And, because I want to learn Spanish. Why not? Yeah. say, well, you're too old to learn Spanish. No, I'm not.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
And, you know, and I've learned so many different discourses in my career, right? You know, I've learned, I practiced consumer law. I never had a single consumer law class,
Hmm.
not a single one. They didn't offer them.
Just jumped in it.
Well, I didn't sort of jumped in it. That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, you gotta.
Yeah,
I know
looked
you gotta
into
figure it
it.
out. Yeah.
And, you know, and I took a lot of lumps learning. Um, and, you know, 2 years ago, I was hired to direct a center at a university. So I direct a center at the West Virginia University College of Law. And I had to learn how to teach
Yeah.
students consumer law.
Yeah. No, that's a
And
good.
that was not easy, right? It's not easy, you know, teaching students. And it was something that I didn't have a lot of experience with. And so I had to learn that too.
Mhm.
Right. And so again, and I kind of relish the challenges.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, without making this a brag session, but there's a bunch of stuff that I did very similar, where quite honestly I didn't know. You know, there's a couple of times I was in a bid to be like the winner of some kind of thing, right? But honestly, I had no experience in that thing. But what I did is kind of what you're saying is like, you know, you had an opportunity to teach, so you went and learned all about that, and then, you know, and did it well. The same thing. I was like, to win the bids and certain thing, you know, contracts and stuff that I did, I just learned those things. I went all in. I learned, and ultimately I would win the bid, and then I had successful shows. You know, everything. Just like I said, I'm not going to break it a brag
Yeah.
session, but
And again, you know, and I've had businesses in other domains, and some have been
yeah.
successful and some maybe not as successful as the others. And that's part of learning
Yeah.
and part of losing and part of getting back up and doing again and doing it better. Right. And that's what we're talking about. Right.
Sure.
And again, you know, we're talking about learning things, but so much of what we're talking about just translates into just everyday life. And I think really what we're driving at here is, for me, this process of learning new things
Mhm.
is what's added a lot of spice to my life, right? I mean, if you want to think about like, what's motivating you, you know, I'm not motivated by watching TV. I'm just not. I'm not that sort of person. I'm not, you know, motivated by maybe some other things that might motivate other people. I'm motivated by getting up and trying things, trying hard things, right? And working at, you know, working at complicated problems and solving complicated problems, right? Working and trying to solve complicated physical challenges, so stuff like that.
But it's
And
because you're
it's,
trying to become a better person, ultimately.
yeah, I mean, and I'm trying to live my life.
Yeah.
Because again, goes back to that original point that we made at the very beginning. Don't waste time. I
Yeah.
don't want to waste any time because I know, and I've internalized this notion that time is finite. Our time is finite. Our currency is our time. And so, how do you choose to spend your time? How do you choose to spend your currency? I choose to spend it learning things
For
and
sure.
trying things. Why? Because it makes me feel good. And I think it makes me better in life. It makes me better in business.
What yeah, really to follow up on that, 'cause that's what I was thinking while you're talking. It really makes all of us. It's going to make you a better husband. It's going to make you a better father. It's going to make you a better everything, right? And all those things are better. They're going to improve your life overall. But even if you're not looking at that, right? Like the part is to always get better, so you're getting better for the people around you too. I think, right?
Absolutely. Right.
It,
Because we're humans. And, you know, we evolved not to be alone.
yeah.
We evolved to live and work with one another.
And I think people forget this too. Like everybody grows, right? So when you get married at 18, let's say, you're not the same person at 28, 38, 48, right? We're all growing. So you should grow and get better together. Grow also to know yourself, right? It's like to be a better person for the other person. But But anyway, the point, I guess, I don't want to get off on all that stuff, but I think ultimately it's a continuous thing to learn, to be better for everybody around you, including yourself. Every day I learn something, right? From even the people around me, they're gonna make me a better person. So um, really, let's before it gets too crazy, let's think of a way to end this, because you did a really eloquent job, and I kind of screwed it up. But what would you do? Let's make a better final point here. I think would be good. Given all this information, let's give somebody advice. Leaving this right here, what would your advice be, just as a person that may be not qualified to give that advice? But what would your advice be? Yeah. Great introduction, right? Here's a guy not qualified to give you any advice. What advice?
It's probably true. I was just thinking about the tree behind me. It's a Halloween tree, by the way.
Yeah.
You don't have like it's like
Right.
sitting in the background.
Yeah.
So advice.
Let's put a bow on this thing.
I think what we've been talking about are some strategies, right? A process. And, what may work for me or you is different than what might work for somebody else. But this is a process I've lived. And it's a process that's been taught to me too, right? A couple of the sessions, we've talked about books and things like that. I mean, this is not, just some sort of things that have just sprung from our minds. I mean, this is things that we've been taught too. And so again, the hope is that it's useful to people, right? That people who want to learn things can deploy some of these strategies. Maybe they've been, thinking about starting something. And so, well, don't waste time. Let's go do it. Right. Or maybe they've tried some things, but they've found that it's not worked out. And maybe it's because they just haven't had the right habits or consistency. Or maybe somebody's been scared away by seeing these threats and, I might lose. Well, maybe we've developed some strategies there. Or maybe they just haven't had the right attitude or mood about it, right? And being a lifelong learner. And so, I mean, the concept is I'm not trying to tell anybody how to live their life, or that this is some sort of exhaustive list, or this is how you have to do things, but it's just an approach. And what are we driving at here? We're just driving at living a good life.
Which everybody can do. I think it's a good approach. And I think we all sometimes need a little motivation, right? I think that's some part of us talking, or at least what I'm hoping is that it doesn't really matter what the context of stuff is, but sometimes in just the whole thing of just talking, one little thing might light a fire, an ember under somebody that makes them do something a little bit different, right? So that's what I'm hoping, that in all these things that we're just giving tools to add somebody's tool bag, right? You can use them or not use them. There may be a time that you need to use them. That's not right now. And then we'll have other tools from other things that we do. So that's my thought. So I think everything that you present is super important. That's kind of why I wanted to obviously talk to you about this stuff. But that's the other thing. I don't want to be pompous or anything else like we're telling people to do, because that's not we're just trying to tell some people some tools that helped us be better people. That's continuous to help us be better people. And if somebody can use them, great. And if they can't, then sorry, we wasted your time. Something like that. So I think that was perfect, man. Thank you for all those things. I think it's been a great 3 parts, whether we do another one or not, but it doesn't matter. All of them have been good. I've appreciated everything you've said. It's definitely made me think about some things, and that's been super important. I think that's ultimately everything we do. Is I want to be able to think. Like you put some stuff out there that made me think, and hopefully it makes some other people think. So I appreciate that.
Good. No, I appreciate it too. I mean, it's been a great opportunity for me to, again, kind of think through these things and things I think about, right? It's quite a different thing to think about them than it is to say them.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure.
It's a whole different level of preparation, and it requires a different level of thought, right?
Yeah.
And so it's been, highly beneficial for me and listen to your experiences too, right? So, I hope, like you said, that we've given folks some things to think about. And, if people have other ideas and other concepts, I mean, I'd love to hear
Yeah. Shoot us a message and give us something else to talk about. Right. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. Have a good night. And obviously I'll see you soon regardless. So thanks for everything. And you're the man.
them. All right. Appreciate you. Thanks.
All right. I'll see you, man.